Okay, here we go. Third time's the charm. Sorry, the first two times I tried to record this, it messed up. So we'll see if this works. Basically, I'm just doing a tutorial for one of my friends. If you're watching this, feel free to do so, and I'll try to make it applicable to everyone. Basically, I just want to show you how to start playing a game where you are doing your own micromanaging, where you're building your own ships and so on. So first off, I just want to show you briefly under themes. This is where you would change themes. You just download it and drag it into the folder. I don't remember what the folder's called offhand, but um, the one I'm going to be using is Extended AI mod. It's actually Iceman's Extended AI mod. And the reason why I'm choosing this is because it comes with pretty good ship templates already. The base game has, they're not really super good. And when the AI uses them and you don't, you will have a distinct advantage. So this one helps the AI with better ship designs. And they also help them with better research paths. But this also contains a bit of a UI mod to help with that, since that can look very confusing and helps. I don't know. It just makes it look a little bit better. Comes with Harry 78's additional races, and then there is a bit of a mod for the tech tree concerning colonization. So that might look a little different from vanilla as well. But that's the reason why I picked this one for my friend, is basically because of the better ship designs that are built into it. And then we're just going to go ahead and start a new game. Okay, I'm really tempted to stop this thing just to see if it's recording right, but I'm going to go ahead and press on. I always go through custom game starts, and I do pre-warp starts. And on this screen here, basically you just have your selection of what you want the galaxy to look like. I like spirals, so that's what I'm picking. Down here on your size, the main thing that you're going to have with size is performance issues. So the bigger you get, the more potential for performance issues you're going to have in late game. And regardless of the system, you will have some slowdown in late game if you go with a really large map, because it's single thread and it just really overwhelms your processor. But I like to play on large, so that's what I'm selecting. Your actual size down here, this, if you go really large here, it affects things like when you set up a defensive fleet to cover a sector. That area, if you have a lot of sectors, means each sector will be smaller. So in contrast, if you do it too small, then and you have a lot of stars, you're going to be covering a whole lot of area. It just won't be easy to manage. So you usually want to match it up. I mean, like I said, I'm going with this. So I usually match it up with a 10 by 10 sector. I'm going pre-warp. This is what I want my starting tech to be. Um, and this also affects how the age of the galaxy. So on this screen, this isn't you. This is what the entire galaxy is. So if you want the galaxy to have a bit of a head start, you can put them on starting over here. And that's probably not a bad idea, but we want to start pre-warp so we're all coming out about the same time as a beginner. Down here, aggressiveness. If you have it on normal, they will almost never declare war on you. Restless is about the same. I'm playing a game right now, unstable, and I still hadn't had anybody declare war, but I am a little bit of ahead of everybody, so that might be part of it. But unstable and chaos is what I usually play on. Difficulty, this AI improvement mod is designed to work with very high or extreme difficulty. If you do it down here, it will be weak, but again, if you're just starting, that might not be a bad idea. Over here, research costs, I prefer to put it on expensive to make the research tree last a little bit longer so you don't whip through it too early. Space creatures, I don't like them. I think it doesn't seem realistic, so I keep it on none. Pirates, if you allow them to be normal, even if set on few and weak, if they're right next to you, they can be overwhelming. So just keep that in mind. If for starting out, I would keep them at very few, or maybe even none. But you do kind of like pirates because you can use them for smuggling. So basically, if you have a colony that's running out of resources, you can assign them a smuggling mission to bring you in those resources and help with getting them to that particular colony. So you do want to have some around. You just want to be careful because they can overwhelm you. So I like to keep mine on weak. On this screen here, this is how frequent colonizable planets are going to be. You may want to put it down here to occasional. They are pretty frequent as it is. I usually play with occasional. Independent life, this is how frequent there's going to be planets that aren't empires, but do have pre-warp sentience on it. Now, the advantage of them is they already have a population. So if you take them over, you get kind of a jump start in growing your population on that planet. However, that can also be a bit of a cheat. So that'll be up to you. The other empires, AI, will do it, but they will not do it as frequently as you will probably try to do it. Down here, colony influence. This is just, you want to usually match this with what it suggests, and this is based on your sector size. So if you did play where we were talking about the 15 by 15 sectors, you would have your influence, I believe, would be less because you don't want it sprawling over as many stars. So that's what that means there. But you usually want to try to match it up to what they recommend. And then this is how far you can colonize away. So if you max this out, that would mean you could have one colony on one side of the galaxy and one colony on the other. And it causes empires to really be spaced out and scattered all over the place. If you bring it down here, then it'll be really tight. And if you end up having a sector that doesn't have very many colonizable planets, you can get locked in. So I usually play with around 2. I've seen a lot of people play around 1 or something lower than that. Realistically, you could set it on this, and that is kind of realistic because there are issues with having a colony that are very scattered, as far as logistics. They become unprotected or unprotectable. So there are limiting factors, but still, usually keep it around somewhere in the middle somewhere. Selecting your race, the main thing you want to look at here is your default reproduction rate. As far as an early, first-time player, you kind of want to have a good high reproduction rate. I'm picking humans, though, so that I'll also get an intelligence officer, so I can kind of briefly show you a little bit about them. Over here, you have your own little colony design, or your flag, your name, where you're going to spawn in the galaxy. Then down here, I'll go ahead and keep it there. Then down here, you have how good of a home planet you start out with. I like to have mine at least agreeable. It seems like you should, if you have it on normal, it's just going to slow you down a little bit. And you can put it on excellent too. You're only going to get that one. It'll be excellent. Then you have size. This has to do with how many colonies you start the game out with. And so I like to have it, I'm going to be starting with just my own. So that's just one colony. Sorry, Hal, I was actually reading your text. That's who this is for, by the way. Tech level, this is for us. We're going to start pre-warp. And then corruption level is, I usually keep it at normal. The further away colonies are from your home, the more likely you're going to have corruption. Pirates also influence corruption. Down here, as far as picking a government, I like to have really good science. So those two governments are usually republic or democracy. They both give you like a plus 25%. However, if you can do other things to make up for that, if you have really good spies, you can make up for it by stealing technology, for example. And in the game, there are two, I believe they're equal, but two different governments that you can discover by spamming out a lot of exploration ships. The first one to find it gets it. And those are the Way of Darkness and the Way of the Ancients. And both of them give you all bonuses and no negatives. And so if you find one, you definitely want to use it. All right, next screen. You've got how many empires you have. And then lastly, over here is just your victory screen. You can turn it off if you want to just play sandbox. But when you do that, you also lose the ability to see that little comparison screen that shows how different empires are doing compared to each other. So if you leave it on and then scroll these all up to max, then you'll be able to still see that, but not have the victory come on you, because the victory condition come up for either you or another empire. And I also never use time limits. Down here is just whether or not you want the Shikhturi. They greatly changed the game in late game, if they come in, they are very powerful. Never played before, or you're just learning, I would turn them off. I've already played with them, so I turn them off because, yeah, they're just, I've already done it. Over here, allow tech trading. That's just a preference. AI will trade between each other. You can use that and abuse it to where you're trading for tech. But I usually don't trade for tech, but I'll leave it on so I can give the AI a little bit of help. Then down here, again, I don't like space creatures, and these will spawn in your home system if you have this checked. So I go ahead and start the game. Now, while this is pulling up, I'll talk about a couple things. The first thing that comes to mind is how you do star ports, because that's something that a lot of people, there was a lot of confusion in the forums when the game first came out, from what I could tell, and still seems that some people do it incorrectly. You don't want a starport at every planet. You want a starport on every few planets so that you end up having a central starport, kind of like the hub of a bicycle wheel, and then other colonies around it linked to that starport. The reason being is the way supplies work in this game is your private sector will try to redistribute supplies evenly or to where there are specific needs, but when there's not a specific need, you try to move them around evenly. And if every planet has a starport, then your supply is going to be so thin that at any particular planet you're trying to build something at, you're going to have a shortage. So it's best to keep, I usually keep as like a rule of thumb, for every half dozen, I'll have a starport. If I've got, I think in video 3, I show you how I just took over a independent planet, and there's a lot of colonies around it, but they're all just got colonized. So there's no point in having a starport in any of them. They're not going to be building anything anyway. They're just going to be growing. So you want to keep your starport central. Trying to think of what else to talk about while it's loading. Hopefully it'll come up here. I'm just going to pause for a second. My voice is starting to give way. Okay, here we go. So the first thing we want to do, wow, it saved, auto saved right at the start. Okay, first thing we want to do is hit start and then pause. Now, over here you have your speed. You probably know that if you played it at all. First thing I'm doing is going from left to right across this. This screen here is not going to be, well, this screen is very important for us now. It's the next one. So briefly over here, this is going to be your population. It'll tell you why your population doesn't like you. The total of it is over here. I'm currently at a level of happiness of 10%. Happiness goes lower, population growth is slower, and then you can also risk rebellion. Cargo just shows you everything that's stored here. If you have any shortages, you'll be able to see that. Resources are the resources present on your planet. This is planet-side resources. Oh, yeah, a little note, because I didn't mention it first 2 videos when I canceled it. If you have a starport above a planet, your resources, everything is actually stored on the planet. So you can get away with just having one cargo bay on your starport. And you won't have to worry about it because your planet is kind of like your main reserve. So anyway, troops, you always want to start out by, recruiting 1 or 2 in case you get a planet raid. Not really no more than 2 early on. And then you garrison. So you click on that, garrison. And then later on, when you want to load troops, if you say load troops at nearest planet, it'll pick up all the troops that aren't garrisoned at that nearest planet. You also see your characters here. If you're in space, if this is a spaceport that you're looking at and you have a character on it, you want to make sure that spaceport is well defended, either with defensive bases or just being well armored. A lot of them will stay like on science labs and so on like that. You want to have them well protected. Construction yard, whenever you build, early on there's a little build queue up here in the top, which is totally fine. But later on you want to use the actual location that they're going to be built at. Because otherwise, if you build in a build queue, it'll build at whatever port's available. So it'll spread them out. So you could be trying to build a fleet in one side, but they're being produced in every, on all 7 or 8 of your starports. So they have to come together first. So later on, you'll want to build from right here. Now, your planet builds all the big stuff, and you can see them here. Stations and big ships like your constructor ship and your resupply ship are built on the planet. The other ones are built at your starport. Docking bays, I don't ever look here. Facilities, here is where if you were to take over a planet and it were to have a pirate base, you'd see it, and then you'd have the option of clicking on it and over here attack. You You would also have anything that gives you bonuses, like in the tech tree, you'll find things where once you get that tech, you have the opportunity to build a wonder. That wonder would be built there. Regular facilities would be built there. That's where you would see that. Now, as far as the purpose of being in here right now is you want to look over here. Remember, we said we're at a happiness of 10. Our growth rate right now is 2%. 2% is not a good growth rate. You want to be able to max out your home planet ASAP. So what you do to do that is you bring this all the way down to 0. Now, if I click on another tab, it refreshes that, and you'll see my happiness is now at 26. If I take it off pause and let it run a little bit, the growth rate will also go up. Now, you don't have to worry about income. Your cash flow would actually go into negative really quick. However, you start out with a decent amount of cash flow, and as soon as you build your first spaceport, the private sector is going to start building ships. And when the private sector builds ships, they pay you to build them. And that's where this money comes in here. This is starport money. So when they build ships, it comes in here. And early on, having 0 tax, you will be able to sustain yourself for a while. And if you ever need to raise tax briefly to get some extra money, then you just raise it up as high as you can to keep it above 1. I usually try to keep it no lower than 15. But you just do that, you'll get some extra tax money. You do it for a month or two, and then you bring it back down to 0 until you get to max population. And anytime you get a new planet, that's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to bring your tax down to 0 until that planet gets built up quickly. And then when it gets at max, you start taxing it. Or if you're in like a war, you can tax it at that time. So that's that screen. Over here, don't really use this much right now early on, but what you would use later on is you can see your colonies listed. You want to look at the quality of that colony, and if it's a good quality, you want to go ahead and queue a colony ship to go there. Good quality is generally 60 or 70%. You'll see both on the forums, at least 60 or 70%. Up here, you'll be able to see your resources. You'll be able to see how many sources you have. Early on, you're not going to have very many. And you'll also be able to see the price. So this is a real economy. Your price will go up between a low of 0.8. Your super high luxuries, your super luxuries will be at 100. Your other luxuries will be at 30 or 3.3 if you have no source. And it'll fluctuate. And this is a good way to find out, especially now your luxuries, you just take them when you can find them. But your strategic resource, I'm going to do it by type, your strategics, you want to try and find at least one of everything. And some of them you're going to want to try multiple ones. Some in particular that are going to be hard to find. Do this because this is alphabetical. Well, shoot. Oh, your carbon fiber is one you use a lot. Sometimes that can be limiting. And there's another one that's you'll see it. You'll start seeing where you'll have outages of them, and you'll just go in here and you'll try to find it. You'll come over here to seeing either resources that your empire specifically needs, and you can hit them. Sometimes this is empty. When that happens, you go to resources that are in demand, priorities for the galaxy, because if you have that, then your private sector is making money, and that's where you get your taxes from, is from what money they make. So you'd go here and you'd like select a specific resource, and it'll show you where you can find that particular resource. Once you want to get luxuries, I believe, like if you get 10 luxuries, it gives you some kind of extra bonus. I can't remember, but you want to try and get as many luxuries as you can. The super luxuries are ones where if you find them, there's only one source in the entire galaxy. You want to try and move a fleet there and move a construction ship there and take it and protect it. Okay, enough for that screen. In here, you have your victory conditions. This is where I was talking about earlier. You can't see this if you have no victory conditions on, but you can compare. The next screen is your policies. Under policies, if you're wanting to learn how to play and manage everything, then you want to set all your policies on to suggest. Later on, some that you might change to automatic are like your gifts, because there are so many other empires, it's hard to manage or to remember to give gifts and to kind of schmooze with them. So you just kind of set that on automatic, and at that point and you can set this to higher, but if you left it at 20,000, later on in the game, 20,000 is not going to be anything. So when they do it, it's not a big deal. Or you can just leave it on suggest if you want. Later on, you'll start getting spammed with suggestions to go ahead and do that, which is why that's one of them I take off. And then the other thing you'll do is down here under here. This is right here, research and design. You want to have this to control your research is going to be controlled manually. Design, you want to leave it at fully automated. And then what you do is you come down here and the ships that you want to manually design yourself, you uncheck. So I don't fool with the private sector as a general rule. And so I leave those checked. I don't want to be designing medium freighters, small freighters, and so on. But all my main ships, I'll leave unchecked. Usually escorts, I just leave them checked. They're not super big. What they do is they do have a role. They follow around ships. So if they have particularly high valued stuff, they might one of them might follow it around to kind of protect it, and they'll usually slow the pirates down long enough so that the cargo ship can warp out. Uh, Now these first four ships after that, and I think maybe it's different in vanilla. I think in vanilla it might be frigate, destroyer, cruiser, and battleship, but in this particular mod, and I might be wrong. I haven't played vanilla in so long, but this is destroyer, light cruiser, heavy cruiser, and battleship. Those are four um, placeholders basically. Now the AI has ship designs for each one, and they generally follow the rule of well, they do follow the rule of going smaller to bigger, but they'll follow it on the rule of how many habit life there are on it. So they might actually I talk about that in the ship designs. I'm just going to skip that. But the point is they don't have any restrictions on them. You can build destroyers to be as big as your battleships, or you could invert them and make your battleships your smallest ships. It doesn't matter. Those are just placeholders for you personally to be able to build. The AI will do them according to their templates, and they do them like you would think, common thought of smaller to larger, but you don't have to be stuck to that. Transport ships for troops, I like to keep them manual because I want to be able to buff them up with a lot of shields and armor. They don't have that much in vanilla, or even by the AI improvement mod does improve that a little bit, but I like to do them more. Carriers, I like to um, really, you could probably get away with just leaving characters on auto. They do a pretty good job there. I usually pull all the weapons off of them in order to make room for more uh, bays, flight bays, or whatever they're called. Because I leave them on to stay out of the fight and just evade. So I generally don't even care if there's weapons on them. And besides, their bombers and fighters should be protecting them. But that's what I do with that. Exploration ships, I always want to be able to put on a ton of fuel because they don't come with a lot of range. And so if they have they start out the default is think maybe one sector, and that's not just how far they can go. That's total how far they go. It doesn't include coming back, and it affects on how many planets they can go to before they have to come back and refuel. So I like to max that out to as much as I can get at the time based on their size. Constructor ships, I just like to put some weapons on them. I don't think they have any weapons base. And sometimes if you go somewhere, there might be something like maybe one pirate will come and attack, or if you're going after the super luxuries, they have like little monsters that come out. And if they don't have any weapons, then it's just gonna kill it. So I put a few weapons on there. Large spaceports. Basically, how I use my spaceports is I leave the small and medium one on automatic, and then I change the large spaceport and just rename it home, my home spaceport. And so that one, I'll only have one in the galaxy. It'll always be at my main colony, and it'll always be the biggest. And then I started out really small, and I just manually upgrade it every now and then when I need to, based on if there's any backup in construction and things like that. A star base is just a blank template that you can use for anything. I use them for the basic star base to put over every planet, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. Your energy, weapons, and high tech, you could leave them on automatic and just spam them whenever you need more. The way I do it is I put one big research center at my home world because that's where most of the protection is going to be. And then whenever you find a planet that has a research bonus, you'll put one there. And I'll explain that here in a minute when I get to the tech tree. Um, then you have your defensive bases. I like to buff them up a lot. So in this game, it's unlike Stellaris. You don't make one big doom stack. You have to, your places, it's hard to move a fleet from one place to another in time to protect something that's being attacked. So in this game, you want to use defensive bases to a lot of them, you can either put a couple of them there and they're more cost efficient than a fleet. Of course, they don't move around like a fleet does, but if you put some around your specific choke points that you want to protect, then that'll give you enough time to, if they can't handle it by themselves, which a lot of times they can, to be able to get your fleet there in time. It buys you some time, but usually you can actually do well with defensive bases and just have regional fleets, which I do talk about in one of the later videos. I think that's it for that. And you can go down here and fool around with boarding and capturing. That's at the very bottom, where you set it up to where you capture a lot. As a general rule, I haven't been playing with that. My recent playthrough, I am starting to try to use boarding and capturing. And then you can either add them to your fleet or you can deconstruct them for research bonus. All right, moving on. What was that? That was over here. This is your editor. You can just go in there and name things, or you can just flat out cheat if you want. Okay, on the diplomacy screen, the 3 best characters that you have in this game, in my opinion, in order of how important they are, is scientists, colony governors, and then leader. Now, leaders actually have the biggest effect. However, the reason why I put them down last is because with a leader, if you don't like them, you can dismiss them and you'll get a new one in a month. Now, this guy here has a -10 from traits on happiness. That's not horrible, but notice this one over here. This is a trait that he has that will scale. Now, you could gamble and dismiss this guy. He will pick up characteristics later on, and his diplomacy will improve, but these things will not. So it might behoove you to just dismiss this colony, this guy, because of his colony happiness, and get something where even if it's a bad trait, but it's scalable, then that trait will become good over time. And then your other traits, if you get one here, bean counter, it's because of this bean counter trait that he has the -10% on colony happiness, but plus 10% against corruption. Now, your scientists are important because you don't get many. In fact, you can see here he didn't get any. But that's why you build, as a side note, this is why you don't put all your research into just one home port, because when you build your home port, it doesn't count as a science station, and you don't have that extra chance when you build a science station of getting a scientist. So you want to have a separate science port that you put up for the very beginning so that you can get that scientist. And then your colony governors will usually grow, and sometimes you get really good. And I show that in one of my next videos, where you can put your colony governor that has a really good growth rate to help grow that colony up to where you can get some good tax income from it. So that's that. Now let's see, over here is your diplomacy. I don't have anything here, but if I did, you could see other places, and the line that's in between them uses this thing over here, and you can tell whether you're at war with them, whether you're friendly, free trade agreement, and so on. Okay, now this screen here shows you your income, and on here, this is kind of complicated, but your colony tax revenue, this is the money you get just from raising taxes. Tribute from other nations, sometimes they'll give you money. That's the gifts thing that we were talking about. Expenses, these are all your expenses. Now, you don't pay for expenses for the private sector. You just pay for your own, but how many expenses they have will influence how much money they have to spend on building new ships and repairing and upgrading, which then does affect your bonus. So the reason why you don't want to have, sometimes you'll have a race that's so happy, you could tax them up to 100% and they would still be happy. Well, the problem with that is if you do that, then your private sector won't have any money to build ships. So then your economy would fail there, and eventually it would come back to haunt you everywhere else. But as a bottom line, your main income is up here, and then down here you'll also get your spaceport income. That's when they build ships. Foreign trade bonuses, that's for your free trade agreements with other nations. And then resorts. You have opportunities, and I talked about this in the last video, opportunities to build resorts. I think second on video 3. You want to build as many resorts as you can around bonuses because that can add up to some significant money later on. So that's the gist on how this works. Okay, lastly, I'm going to look at the tech tree. Now, your tech tree, primarily what I'm going to look at is what you want to start with in each category, and then how research stations and research bonuses work because it's very convoluted. As a general rule, your first tech in weapons is going to be what this one starts you out with, which is armor plating. Because you start out with no armor and no shield. So you want your armor plating and your shields pretty quickly. But if you're not going to be fighting, which you probably won't be, and in fact, if you have pirates, you're always going to want to pay them off early on. And then you pay them off, then you don't even have to worry about building up your military. It's just not needed yet. So you can wait until you start getting some more research and focus on things that are better for infrastructure and so on. So you would do your armor, and then you would just pick a weapon, whatever weapons you want to do. Maybe probably 2 or 3 of them. Like right now, I'm doing missiles, and I'm doing Epsilon torpedoes. So the torpedoes are high damage but short range, whereas missiles are long range. And then you also do like fighter bays. So I'm focusing on these specifically. Now, because this one down here for your light, well, your interceptors. No, it's not. I'm thinking something else. Don't worry about it. Okay, so yeah, just pick whatever weapons category you want to focus on, and then don't neglect these guys here because this has to do with your ground. And you cannot take over a planet without a lot of troops, and this helps with that area. Also helps with troop maintenance, some of them. Going on to energy. Energy is where once you get the warp core precursors, which you have to explore your own system to find, you're going to start doing your warp field research immediately. So whatever you start here, you probably won't finish by the time you discover it, and you'll just have to put it on pause. But the ones you want to focus, they have you focusing on shields, but if you're going to be paying off pirates, which almost everybody recommends doing, I wouldn't worry about that right at bat. What I would focus on is spaceship construction size. Your first ships start out with a construction size maximum of 230 for like your Explorer. And an exploration ship with 230 is not going to go very far. So you want to get that exploration ship to be bigger. This also helps all your ships with cargo load and ship size. So I focus a lot on this. In the game, usually if you ever look at this energy area, it's going to be my warp drives have focus, and it's going to be my construction has focus. Everything else you're going to need, and you can keep them pretty balanced as to when you select them. Just keep them all pretty balanced. But your main ones that you're going to be going spearheading or trying to really focus on are warp drives and your ship size. You will need to get energy collection. Don't neglect your mining. Actually, that might be a third one that you want to increase because that helps your economy. Under high tech, don't need this right away. You might do that 4th or 5th. That's your enhanced resources. What you want to focus on first are your medical system and entertainment system. These are the two. They give you a component, medical center, recreational center. Those are the 2 things you want above every single planet. So whenever you get a new planet, you want to put some kind of a base or starport over it that has those 2 systems. That helps your colony growth and happiness. After that, after you build those, then you can start focusing things on like storage size. This is going to help with your ability to carry fuel. It's also going to help your private sector. Anything that helps your private sector helps you with money. Another thing that you're going to want to do early on, probably after you do that, would be colonization. When you get this first colonization, you will be able to colonize. I'm not really sure why. Like, for example, our base is continental. I don't know why there's another continental one here because you don't necessarily need it. You do need it if you want to go on to any further where you have your terraforming ability and advanced colonization on this particular game. And you have some other things down here. But your first one, each one is going to be a little bit more expensive. So for Continental's the cheapest at 120, then Marsh is at 240, then I believe Desert is at 480, and so on. Every time you do one, you're going to have more options to colonize. So you'll want to get this first, and then you can put it on pause for a little bit while you're just colonizing your continentals that are in your area. Once you get that area and you start getting some of these other techs that you'll want to have, and you'll want to keep almost all of these pretty level going forward. Another one that's big is your space commerce. You want to get space commerce. Down here is actually, you have a really good, the best wonder in the game, I believe, is that trade bazaar. Now, in the AI improvement mod, what's cool is he does make it so other empires beeline to that so that you're not always the one that gets it. But you want to focus on this a lot. Most of the rest you keep pretty steady. Here's your research. This improves your research. But at some point, once you maybe start expanding and you can't expand any further with just your continentals, then you want to start getting all these others up. And then another thing you'll be doing during the game is when you start making more money, if you have money to spend, is you want to start clicking on these. And when you click on them, you can, I don't have enough money to do it on this, but it says you could spend 60,000 credits to make that crash course, which brings it up to a 3 times the speed. You also sometimes have scientists make breakthroughs, which when they make a breakthrough, it bumps it up to 3 times the speed as well. If it has 3 times the speed, you can't cancel it and pause it. So like if this one were to start and get some progress without being crash course, I could stop it and then have this one go first and then restart and it'll pick up where it was. But if it has a crash course, you can't stop. That's the only drawback. But that's how you speed up your tech research. And then lastly over here, this is where you're going to have your total research right now is 17. This is why you build your research support, is you want to get it above this. Now, there is a max. Even if it gets high over here, it's going to max out at this. But then you have bonuses. And the two kinds of bonuses that you get are bonuses for planets, and you only get the best planets. So if you had 3 planets that you liked and you said, oh, I'm going to put research center on all 3 of them, you only get the bonus from the highest one. So you want to find one really good planet that has weapons bonus, one good for high tech, and one good for energy, and you build a lab on those. So the thing is, though, when you build that lab, you don't get the bonus unless you have a scientist there. So you have to put a scientist on it, which means you want to protect that. That's why you want to manually make your individual research stations really strong and maybe put a defensive base around it as well to protect it. So you'll get your base, which is the max that you can. If you max this out, then it would be something like this. So if we just had a bunch of labs in each category for our main home port, that's where we're going to put our labs. We could build that up to like 1,000 on each, but it will max out at this. But then you would get your bonus for the planets, 1 for each, and then you would get your bonus for your scientist, and it would be the highest bonus of each scientist. So if you had one scientist that had 20 on all of them, 20% bonuses, and he was the highest on all of them, then you would get all of those. If you had another scientist you randomly got and you had a 40% on one and nothing on others, you would get that 40% in that category and then 20% on the others. Now, it doesn't matter where those scientists are, so getting a 20% bonus in weapons, you don't need to put that on the 20% bonus planet that you might find. You get that bonus just by having any scientists on there. But at least that's my understanding. That could be wrong. I don't think so. I think that's the way it works out. But your main areas are going to be your total amount of research labs that you have built, then 1 for each planet type that has a bonus in that area, and then 1 for each category that your scientist has a bonus in. And then that all adds up, and you can be well over this 270. And this number grows as your population grows. Anyway, that's it for this video. Hopefully this third time's a charm and it'll take, and I hope you enjoy.